realize that, we've had such terrible loss of life. Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made that decision to pull. So then we watched the building collapse.
They ignored it because they wanted it to happen. Every launch starts with a false flag operation.
All time is all time. It does not change. It does not lend itself to warnings or explanations. It simply is. Take it moment by moment, and you will find that we are all, as I've said before, bugs in amber. Kurt Vonnegut, Slaughterhouse-Five. Hello, dear listeners, and welcome to Historica Esoterica. I am your humble Professor Roswell, and I'm joined, as always, by my friend
and intrepid student, Matt K. Ultra.
Welcome, Matt. It's good to see you again.
It's always good to be seen, except for by our listeners.
That's right. We do not want that. We have a fun, at least I think it's fun, topic tonight. We're talking about the Augsburg Book of Miracles, or alternatively...
Oh yeah, hang on. Let me hit you with the German title.
Hit me with the German.
I think a little more excitingly, Das Augsburger Wunderzeichen-Buch.
Yes.
There's going to be a lot of us attempting German in this episode. Yeah. Neither of us is taking classes on it. Yeah, a lot of me attempting German in this one.
Yeah. I'll be busting out Koine Greek, so but we'll get there. So this is kind of a cool, spooky, but also just like really artistic book from the early modern period / Renaissance. It's what's called an illuminated manuscript, made in Augsburg, Germany. Matt, do you know anything about illuminated manuscripts?
I only really just know that they look super cool, because I'll like go down the rabbit hole of looking at pictures of them.
They're very cool. So for those listening, what it is, it's essentially just like any formal document from that time period, like between medieval and early modern, with like cool drawings in the sides, like around the text, borders. If you follow the Twitter account Weird Medieval Guys, most of those medieval drawings are from illuminated manuscripts.
Yeah, it's either Bosch or an illuminated manuscript. Those
right, exactly. Yeah, and if you've seen that episode of SpongeBob where he draws the big fancy T, that's the kind of thing you would see in an illuminated manuscript. Just so you have a frame of reference visually. But yeah, so essentially, what is this book, Matt, and whence does it come from?
So this book was written in 1552 by an unknown author, although there's a couple theories about who that is, but we'll get to that in a second. And it contains a series of drawings, and each one on its own little folio, which is a page where only one side has anything on it, as I learned for this episode. And so the first, hang on, let me see if I have the stats real quick.
Yeah.
The first 15 folios are illustrations from the Old Testament.
Yeah.
The majority of the book, which is to say folios 16 to 171, is dedicated to non-biblical events of note, many of which were seen as signs of the coming apocalypse or other, just visitations from God.
Yeah. Weird astronomical phenomena, natural disaster, cool creatures.
Yeah, lots of comets.
Lots of comets.
And the remainder of the book, unlike Knowing, is dedicated to the Book of Revelations.
There's no last page where it's really aliens the whole time, right? No.
And there's 19 pages currently accounted for, although some are missing from that portion. There are also some missing from the majority, like the center of the book as well.
Yes, exactly. So there was this great quote from one of the reproductions of this book printed from the foreword that I wanted to read. about this book, and it's, quote, "The surprisingly modern-looking, sometimes hallucinatory illustrations and the cursory descriptions of the Book of Miracles strikingly convey a unique view of the concerns and anxieties of the 16th century," end quote. And I thought that was a perfect way of kind of summing this up, is that the drawings for like a sort of medieval, sort of early period manuscript are really cool looking.
Oh yeah.
And just like, I think abstract is a great word for some of them. Like, these are just sick. I could like see myself buying some of these and like hanging it on a wall, above
Yeah,
my
a lot
desk.
of them are like very surrealist. Like they would not be out of place in like several like modern art museums that I have visited.
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
It's cool, especially if you like, if you're familiar with any like medieval art in any way. Like sometimes the anatomy or composition can be different.
Wonky.
Wonky's a perfect word for it. A little cartoonish in like a specific way. And there's definitely some of that in this, but like, I don't know, the colors are very vivid, and just like some of the artistic choices are pretty striking.
Yeah. And before we just dive into it, I would like to note, we discussed this before. We're going to try and put up these on our YouTube video as we discuss them. So I recommend strongly checking the YouTube for this one, even if you usually use like Spotify or something else, because I would like you to see the things we're talking about. You could also painstakingly Google them as we talk about them, but I don't know, that doesn't sound like any fun.
No, it doesn't. But if you want to, that's fine.
Yeah, I'm not your dad. Oh yeah.
I will throw up the images in the video for anybody who would like to migrate over to YouTube, Historica Esoterica. Subscribe, smash that like button.
It was all a trick to get you to subscribe. You fools, you've fallen for it.
But yeah, so yeah, this is something I'd just recommend anybody like look up and just like look through the art. Like we were saying before we started recording, like if it wasn't so expensive, I would get this book for like a coffee table book, just to have just strange art, available for visitors. Yeah,
the Wikimedia Commons actually has like almost half of these books. I mean, almost half of the folios just like uploaded on there. It's the main resource I used for like getting the pictures.
Same.
So I highly recommend just looking that up. You also get to look at the German name of the book again, which, I mean, who doesn't want to do that?
Aschenberg and Wunderbook.
But one more note before we go, I would like to note. So apparently on one of the pages, the name of one Hans Birkemeyer, I guess, a German artist, is stamped in. So Bergenheimer, no, not Bergenheimer, I'm not sure where I got that one from. Birkemeyer died in 1531, which is a little bit before this book was completed. So some speculate that it was actually done by his son, Hans Birkemeyer the Younger, who was lesser known as a painter. Also, just as a side note about Hans Birkemeyer the Older, he studied under one Martin Schongauer, who also does some cool medieval art. Most importantly, the painting "A Foolish Virgin." And if you want to feel smart on Twitter, just comment that underneath people who say annoying things, just like that picture.
That's really good. That's really good.
That's the real reason I wanted to talk about the possible authors, because it's not really known. That's just speculation, and no one is for sure about who it is that actually made it. Yeah.
And like you said, there's some internal evidence that points to those two, but we don't have an exact date for when the book was actually created, more of a time frame based on the internal evidence of the document. For example, since this book quotes heavily from the Bible, they were able to cross-reference that with which Bible it was quoting from, which was the Luther Bible that came out in 1545. So it would have had to have been made sometime after 1545. However, it also documented a hailstorm in the town of Dordrecht, which I think is in the Netherlands. And that happened in 1552. So that was kind of the range that was placed by scholars on this book. Like, it was likely started sometime before 1552 and then completed around then.
or just like nothing crazy happened for 2 centuries and then he finally
Yes,
got
yeah.
around to it. Who
Just
knows?
got around it, yeah. Although based on the kind of style of dress, I would say it's definitely a 1500s.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You look at these things and you can tell like, oh yeah, this is medieval.
Exactly. Especially on what they thought, first century Israel looked like, or before looked like, what they were wearing then.
Yeah, I was a big fan of that one. We'll get to that.
We'll get to that. So, was there anything else you wanted to say, like as an overview of this book before we just jump in and just start looking at the funny pictures?
I think we've touched on all of the other notes I have. One other thing I looked it up. It is currently in the collection of a guy named Mickey Carton, who's an art collector.
Yes. Did you find anything on him?
Brother, let me tell you, I spent some time looking, and no, he seems clean. I put in pretty much every intelligence asset who's connected to the art world that I knew, and just searched them with his name.
Yeah,
and I couldn't find anything. So he's good at covering his tracks.
See, I had the same exact thought, and I looked him. I probably didn't spend nearly as much time as you did, but I also could not find anything. So he seems just sort of like a rich guy.
Yeah, he seems just he dresses fairly fashionably. I found a couple pictures of him.
So we can't hate him.
Yeah, exactly. Which, no one who dressed well has ever been evil.
I mean, Kanye, come on. Only good billionaire.
Do you want to jump into the pictures?
Yeah, so we had some of the ones we researched. We both researched the same ones separately, and then we have some unique folios that I did and you did, and vice versa. But we both did the first folio together, which is obviously Folio 1, which covers the flood account from Genesis chapter 7, 11 through 14. Matt, what are your thoughts on this picture?
Part of why I chose this one, because everybody knows the story of the biblical flood. Like, it is one of the most widely known Old Testament stories, I'd say.
Yeah.
It is immediately off the bat, you can just see like how vivid these colors are. It was beautiful, and it's
cool.
Genuinely, and I'm going to say this a lot throughout this, it genuinely feels like the world is ending when you look at this one. That's really the main reason I chose this one. It's just, it is so beautiful.
It's cool. I'm glad you pointed that out, because that's not the reason I chose this one. I chose this one because what struck me about it was two things. First, something we kind of mentioned, which was how the clothing of the people being drowned in the flood, they all look like medieval peoples, which at first is kind of strange looking, because I'm so used to thinking of like, second millennium BCE, like Mediterranean garb when I think of like these type of accounts. So like it was kind of a weird thing to see it in much more modern clothing, but it makes so much sense if you think about it. If you're just a guy who's been hanging out in Augsburg, Germany, you have no way of really knowing with exact certainty what the kind of clothing of that era and that specific place would have been. It sort of makes sense that you'd be like, yeah, they just wore normal clothes, normal to you, right? So that was the first thing that struck me. The second thing was the look of the ark, which is very interesting, because the way the ark is often depicted in like American evangelical, like modern senses, it's like a little boat with a house on it usually, right? Which is very fun and it's whimsical. It's stupid, but that's how it looks.
It's probably not how it worked, but
well, I mean, we know what the ark looks like based on the account. It was
give the dimensions.
It's a big wooden shoebox essentially. So that's interesting, but this ark is not quite like that. It's neither of those things. It almost to me looks like a silver temple with like gold ornamentation on the top.
Yeah, or like a fortress. I had the same thought. It is a very strange ark.
Yeah, it's cool. It's not what I would have thought for the ark, but it's weirdly closer and also way off in some ways than the modern like conception of the boat ark. So that just struck me as interesting that this guy also didn't think boat, he thought weird building, which is like, okay, cool. And I, part of me wonders, like, it also kind of just surfacely vaguely reminds me of the Ark of the Covenant. So I was wondering if maybe there was a connection there, because it does kind of have that ornamentational look. There's no way to know for sure. I also couldn't find the translation for the caption that's in Gothic German on this one. I assume it's just the account from Genesis 7, 11 through 14.
Yeah, just I don't remember if we stated this, but each of these little paintings has a caption underneath it written in Gothic German in this script. Looks super cool. We don't speak normal German, let alone German from the 1500s. So we did have to look up some translations.
That's right.
And
not all of them were available,
sometimes-
unfortunately.
Yeah, sometimes we found them. Sometimes we just went, well, we know that it's the Ark, so we can extrapolate from there.
Figured it out. Yeah, in some cases, for the biblical ones, thankfully, like the Wikipedia Commons had the citation in the Bible, so it was really easy to find. But yeah. So, okay, cool. Anything else you want to say about this one before we move on?
No, yeah, let's move on to 23, your next one.
Folio 23. This one's fun. So sort of describing this one, it's like a green hilly landscape with kind of a walled city, some castles, and there's three strange golden balls, one on the ground and two in the sky. And we realize these are not three separate golden balls, but it's sort of showing a kind of a process of this golden ball going up and down. And there is a caption on this one as well, which we do have a translation on, which I will read for you right now. It says, quote, "In the land of the Romans in the year 73 BC, a golden ball was seen in the sky, which then came down to the earth and rolled around and flew back up into the air again, in the direction of the rising sun, so that its great size covered up the sun completely. This was followed by the Great Roman War," end quote.
Yeah, and I thought that was super interesting.
It is super interesting. So I actually looked into this because I was thinking, Romans were great record keepers, thankfully. So if something like this happened, we probably would know about it, right? Especially considering the time period. This is just 10 years before the Caesar saga begins, essentially, which is a Roman Republic, an exceedingly well-documented time in that era. So for that specific year, the only point of note I could find in 73 BC was the year that Herod the Great was born. And if you know who Herod the Great was, he pops up later in the Christian Greek Aramaic scriptures, aka the New Testament. So that's just a kind of point I wanted to highlight because it's an interesting synchronicity with these biblical themes. But I could not find anything similar from that year. However, 4 years earlier, there was a similar phenomena reported by Pliny the Elder. Did you see this?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So this was in 76 BC, 40 years older. Remember, with BC, we're counting backwards. So I'm just going to read some quotes from this paper called The Roman Fireball of 76 BC by Richard B. Stothers, NASA Goddard Space Flight Center. But it also quotes from Pliny himself. So I'll start with a quick quote from Pliny. It says, quote, "A spark was seen to fall from a star and to grow as it approached the earth, and after it became as large as the moon, the light began to shine as on a cloudy day. Then, when the object was moving back to the sky, it changed into a torch. This is recorded only once. The proconsul Silanus and his retinue saw it in the consulship of Gnaeus Octavius and Gaius Scribonius," end quote. So that's a little strange.
Very weird.
Yeah, and so I'm wondering if maybe the author of this Book of Miracles just maybe got the years wrong, because those are two very close dates. I said 4 years, by the way. It was only 3 years. I did not do my math right there.
It's okay. I didn't even catch it, so it's not like I can judge you.
But another thing in that quote, it says, "This was followed by the Great Roman War." Well, if you know anything about Romans, they had a lot of great wars. The only one I could really think to attribute this to was the Roman Civil War from 49 to 45 BC, which is Julius Caesar and Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus, and the two factions of Rome colliding. That was the closest civil war that was related, and maybe the biggest Roman scuffle within that within 30 or 40 years.
I wonder who won that one.
Yeah, I know. Well, we'll never know. But I liked kind of Richard B. Stothers' read on this phenomena. He says, quote, "The details of the phenomenon described by Pliny are not as unique as he implies. The description combines elements of shooting sparks, balls of fire, night suns, torches, and certain kinds of short-lived comets that are recorded occasionally by Pliny and elsewhere in Roman literature. Only in the uh, concatenation, wow, I've never seen that word in my life. Only in the concatenation of events must have struck Pliny as unique. And later on he says, although Pliny does not explicitly mention the shape of the large spark, his comparison of its size with the moon strongly suggests roundness. Leidas clearly understood it this way, end quote. So a meteoric fireball is sort of the, scholarly understanding of this event. If this is the same one that the book is recording.
Yeah, there's a specific kind of meteor that one of my sources assumed it to be, which is to say it's called a bolide, which is just a very, very bright meteor. Something about its composition, when it hits the atmosphere, makes it shine incredibly brightly.
Yeah.
You can find I might have you include the link to this video, actually, in the description.
Oh,
but
yeah.
There's a video that includes, like, Russian dash cam footage from, like, 2013 or so of one. And it looks like a giant ball of fire just, like, zipping across the earth.
The only thing that's different is that, like, the difference between, this, like, Pliny's account and the account in the Book of Miracles is that the ball came to roll around on the ground, which is very weird, and then it covered up the sun. And in the painting, it's like a bright, clear day, sunny day, and Pliny said that this happened on a cloudy day. So they may not be the same thing, but it's the closest thing I could find, like, in the historical record to this. So
yeah, and something that may come up later as well. Obviously, translation is a big deal here because Pliny was not writing in Gothic German, which our author was. So we can only assume that there was some level of translation occurring. So it's also possible when things differ slightly like this, that's the cause as well. Just something to keep in mind as we proceed.
A little bit of a translation error. But moving on, we can move to Folio 67. Matt, would you like to tell us about that?
Sure. This is it's a comet and a fiery shaft. So here, I'll describe the picture first, and then we'll dive into it. So I actually wasn't able to find a full version of this one, but I just found it so interesting I had to go with it, even though we could only find like a detail of it. But the quote is, in the year AD 1351, in the month of December, a comet was seen in the sky around midnight. Afterwards, heavy winds sprang up, and a fiery shaft was seen to fall from the sky, which then presaged great disagreement between the Pope and the Emperor. At first, I was hoping, I didn't know what presaged mean. I was hoping that it meant like caused, like the Pope and the Emperor were arguing over like the big fiery shaft. Unfortunately, no, it means predicted. However, I did look up who was the Pope at the time, and it was Pope Clement the Sixth, who, as I told you off mic, apparently resigned right when the Black Plague started hitting, which is a very funny move. Just be like, yeah, sorry guys, I'm calling it here.
Yeah.
But he frequently argued with various emperors and kings. So he fought with King Edward III of England. He fought with several Byzantine emperors. So I couldn't figure out which emperor and pope specifically would be arguing around the time. But it looks like, assuming that something was predicting arguments between the pope and the emperor is generally a safe bet.
Yeah.
If Pope Clement V is in power, the Sixth is in power. See, and then I think the next one is one that we both chose.
Folio 81.
Yes.
Which is 1456, the reign of blood and flesh, or in German, Blut und Fleischenregen.
Yeah.
I don't think I got that right, but reading it really brought me joy.
It's so fun.
It is fun, but this painting is a little less fun. It's kind of nasty.
It's terrifying. So yeah, we see, just a beautiful little landscape, cute little rolling hills, little city.
Little boats.
And notably also streaks of blood and flesh falling from the sky.
Yeah, which does put a damper on things.
Yeah.
It just sort of looks like whoever painted this just kind of took their brush and went like, wah, 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 with red. and it's a great effect. It's very abstract and scary looking, but certainly not quite as realist as some of the other paintings.
Yeah, and so I couldn't find anything about this specific one, like that occurred this year, but I did just sort of look up like blood rain, because that's a thing that shows up all over the place in medieval literature. And
Right.
earlier than that, I think it's even referenced in the Iliad, if I remember right. But so there's lots of scholarly assumptions about what could cause it, including, the classic, whenever anything becomes blood, like water becomes blood, there's always maybe it was an algae bloom,
Right.
which has never been very convincing for me. But there's
Or
also,
not satisfactory.
yeah, there's also the theory that there was just red dust in the clouds, and so like the rain was dirty, which I don't know,
Could be.
also possible. Neither of those accounts for the chunks of flesh, though, which I'm a little more concerned with.
That's a little creepy. It does make you wonder, because I think it's easy with some of this stuff, especially when you're talking about medieval, early modern period, to be like, oh, those silly people, they're just kind of dumb people. It's like, no. People have been smart for a very long time. Perhaps maybe more superstitious, or not perhaps, but absolutely more superstitious.
Fairly
Like,
objectively.
Fairly objectively. But these people weren't dumb. So, if this story was reported, I don't know, it's like there is a chance that there was something to it, like that they saw something that was spooky, and because of superstition took it a little bit more to be like blood and chunks of flesh as opposed to something else. But what that could be, I'm not sure.
Yeah, but there are like very well documented accounts of like it raining like frogs or fish, because
Right.
like a water spout sucks someone up and then just sends them flying.
Yeah.
So if you're looking for a definition other than my personal theory, which is that a portal to Valhalla was opened up in the clouds and it just sort of rained for a little bit. If you're looking for a more scientific one that has, like evidence, if that's something you're worried about, that's the one that I go for, not like there was an algae bloom in the clouds and these silly people couldn't tell the difference between slightly red water and blood.
Blood, yeah.
Which has a very distinct everything. Like blood famously is thicker than water.
True. And if you look at the medieval times, you know what blood looks like.
Yeah, they were not a good time. People were bleeding all the time.
Evil is in the word. It's medieval. But yeah, so this was a cool yet creepy one. One of the creepier kind of portents in this book. Anything else strike you as interesting about this one?
I do like what you noted, just sort of like on the, because we're gonna, just for the listeners at home, I at least will be pretending to like know things about art as we discuss this. I do like what you noted about like the very rough brush strokes. It does just sort of look like he just went a little wild, because it does definitely contrast with the like cute and very well painted little scenery in the background. I don't know, it's very creepy vibes all around.
Yeah, it is, and it's cool. That's all I got to say about it. Moving right along, we also both did this next one, which is Folio 90, the Tiber River Monster. Were you able to find the translation of the caption?
Yes. Do you want me to read that?
Please.
Sure thing. In AD 1496, in the month of January, at the time the Tiber burst its banks high and wide near Rome, what wondrous creature appeared, found dead where the raging and the might of the Tiber's waters had subsided, and was in this shape and form as it is painted here. Speaking of, how do we want to describe this creature's shape and form?
I have a good description of it, also from the Wikimedia Commons, which was, quote, Tiber monster with donkey's head, hoof, cathopod, fish scales, face on hip, tail with dragon's head, and trunk for right arm. And the picture also shows the Tiber in front of the city of the walls of Rome. So there's a lot going on. This is very like, when you think of like mythical monsters, like not in our modern like kind of cinematic sense, but if you think about like what Greek people thought monsters looked like, and they're just these weird smashed together amalgams of things, this is that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's this guy.
It's very strange. I do like how there's just a jar chilling by this, like not an urn, but what are those kind of classical Grecian
like a
vases
vase?
called? There's a term for them.
I'm really
forgetting.
dumb.
No, it's fine. But yeah, so that's kind of a strange detail. But yeah, we see the Tiber River behind this weird creature. We see a tower to its right and a fortified medieval-looking city with a bridge to its left by the river.
Did
this
you
is cool.
Did you see the origin on this one?
No, please elucidate me.
Okay, so this one, so that story and the drawing, right, are pretty cool, and also demonstrably false. So this creature shares its exact appearance, and also like even like the background down to like the castle walls, with a if what was effectively a political cartoon called "The Papal Ass of Rome," as drawn by Lucas Cranach the Elder, who also, just as a side note, if you've seen like a portrait of Martin Luther, it's probably his, like the one where he's wearing like the little hat, he's got like the double chin. Yeah. So as you may guess by the fact that he painted Martin Luther and also drew this hideous monster to satirize the Pope, he was not a big fan of the Catholics. So our painter is either mistaken in his "it washed up on the river" theory, or he maybe just misunderstood the translation, or he's subtly joining in on satire, or of course it's also possible he's just doing a little trolling. He just threw this one in there for fun.
Yeah, could be. And it is fun. It's just a cool little monster.
It's fun. He's just a weird little guy.
I like how busty he is. I will say that.
It is weird. Yeah, that's a thing I've noticed about like a lot of like demons or devils when they were painted in this era, was like androgyny was the most like quick way to like shorthand them being evil.
Which is strange.
It's a little weird.
Don't do that. Yeah, that's kind of all I have to say about this. That's interesting. I'm glad you looked into that, because I was just sort of like, ooh, cool monster.
Yeah.
Put it in the notes.
Yeah, it was funny when you said that you had it. I was like, oh, Roswell's absolutely got this one, because there's like a guy bashing on an ancient pope.
I would never bash on an ancient pope.
Yeah, to be clear, listeners, we're being nicer to the Catholic Church. It's just that, unfortunately, the artist is not. So sorry.
Yes, so.
All right. Up
cool.
next, we
got Folio 119.
Oh, actually, I have
Folio
Folio 110. Apologies to cut in front of you in line like this.
Please do.
And so I have the translation of this one again. So this is, well, I'll read that and then we'll give you the description of the painting. In the year 1527, on the 11th of October, at 4 o'clock in the morning, this comet was seen in Westrick for 3/4 of an hour, and then it disappeared again. It was extremely long and yellowish red, like a diluted blood in color. At the front head was like a bent arm, as if it had a sword in its hand and was poised to start striking with it. And at the point of the sword there were 3 big stars, and from those stars there issued a cloud-colored steam, which was longer than the comet's tail, just as it is painted here.
This one's cool. I don't know how you could describe that better than what we just read.
Yeah, that's why I was like, yeah, let's just go for that. It's exactly that. It's a comet. There's a little arm sticking out of it holding a sword, and he's got 3 little stars behind it. It looks pretty cool. The only I couldn't find anything for this one either. I looked it up. A lot of these, I think, because as we noticed, dates seem to get shuffled around a little bit in this book. A lot of them, when I searched like comet with sword and then the year, I just got no results. But if I can put on my little astronomy hat, right. I think I remember hearing that comets with 2 tails occurred sometimes. So if we want to assume, if we're looking for a reasonable explanation and not just the very cool fact that there was a comet waving a sword around, that's my guess, is that it was like a double comet kind of situation.
I don't know. I think it was the comet with a sword. That's so much cooler.
It's way cooler that the comet just rolled up to town, ready to start swinging,
ready to start a fight. That's sick. Yeah. No, this one's cool. It's weird. The colors are cool. I could see this being on a weird abstract postcard or a fridge magnet.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean?
That's how I feel about a lot of these. Is I've looked at them and I've thought this either would work as a sticker or art inside vinyl for a pretentious heavy metal band. Is the other thing I was thinking. This could totally be an inside cover for something.
Yeah, absolutely. It does look like, I don't know, like something like cover art for some sort of Jeff Mangum like
Yeah.
album or something. If that makes any sense. Sweet. Moving right along. Now we can do Folio 119. I don't have a lot
Yes.
on this, but this one's interesting because the caption and the picture sort of contradict each other.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to read the caption. It says, quote, "In the year 1531, on the 26th and 28th of January, bloody and fiery signs were seen at night in the sky in Lisbon, in Portugal, on the 26th day, and then on the 28th, a great whale was seen in the sky. This was followed by great earthquakes, so that about 200 houses collapsed and more than 1,000 people were killed." So to show you what this is actually showing, it shows like a great like ocean, which now I'm wondering maybe if it's supposed to be clouds. But we see like from this ocean or perhaps clouds, like the tops of towers jutting out and like kind of falling over. And then to one side, we see similar red streaks like we saw in the Rain of Blood and Flesh, which I guess is supposed to be the fiery signs. And then at the center bottom of the page, there's this weird like dog-like head coming out from the waves or perhaps clouds, just kind of
Yeah.
going. Meh.
Medieval painters really could not figure out whales. Like any painting of like Jonah, for instance, and I can't blame them because admittedly, it's not like scuba equipment existed back then. You really just found them when they died and washed up on the shore.
Right.
But still, so yeah, this one was cool. It's interesting because I thought at first that, well, I've heard of another earthquake hitting Lisbon, the 1755 one, a super famous one, right? It's I don't know if you're familiar with this one.
I've heard of it, yeah.
But like, yeah, the writer and first Redditor Voltaire pretty famously used the 1755 one as like part of his argument against God's existence, because it occurred on a Sunday while all these people were in church, which is, if there's a giant earthquake going on, a huge stone structure is not the thing you want to be in. So a lot of people were crushed. And Voltaire's response was basically like, lol, if God exists, then why bad thing happen? Which, yeah, got him, man. No one's ever come up with that one before.
Good work, Voltaire. You big smart.
Yeah, so I think Lisbon might just be on a fault line if two very big and notable earthquakes occurred there.
And I'm just realizing I did not even look into this one. So let's just do a quick on mic Google, which we don't usually do, to see if there's any references. I'm going to go ahead and say I doubt it based on the timing conventions of this book, but actually, I should have bet against myself. The 1531 Lisbon earthquake occurred in the Kingdom of Portugal on the morning of January 26th between 4 and 5 o'clock. Estimated 30,000 deaths. So,
any reference made to whales in that article?
Yeah. By article, you mean Wikipedia? There was flooding, and because of this. Yeah. No. Nothing about that, which is interesting. But I guess it's. There was a tsunami.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, that'll do it.
So maybe that had something to do with a whale being seen. Whale just got flung onto, to land by the tsunami.
Just hanging out.
Yeah, I guess, but there's no references to that, at least in the Wikipedia page for the 1531 Lisbon earthquake. Wow,
Which I guess is to be expected.
Right. But no, this one's just cool. I mainly picked this one out just because I like the dog-headed whale.
Yeah, it's
and
pretty
like
cool.
The weird blue color palette with just like hints of orange.
I love the collapsing buildings in the background.
Yeah,
too. Like they feel like almost like the animated Batman series.
Yes,
and
I
like
do.
the paintings of Gotham that they would use for the backgrounds. That's like almost the feeling I get from those. Like they feel
just,
really cool.
Inspired and
Mm-hmm.
I guess gothic for lack of a better term, which makes where we're at in the stream of time. But yeah, that's a cool one. Cool. Moving right along, Folio 124. Why don't you tell us about that, Matt?
We've got the Warrior over Strasbourg. So I have another quote for the translation here. Also, like we said earlier, a lot of these we were just sort of like pulling off the internet because we don't speak German. We definitely don't speak Gothic German. So if there's any inaccuracies, and we have Gothic German scholars in our listenership, we're sorry.
Yeah, and please let us know what we got wrong
Yeah.
by commenting or sending
Yeah,
us mail.
engage with the video.
Yeah.
Share it with all your friends and say, "Ooh, look at how dumb they got it wrong." Okay, so the quote is, "In the year 1531, a bloody vision with a sword in its hand was seen near Strasbourg and in other parts, as well as a fiery citadel, and opposite that, an armed host on horseback, just as is painted here."
So cool. That's such a cool description.
And yeah, A, it's a super cool description, and B, that is exactly what's painted here.
Yeah.
I found no reference to this. I didn't spend super long looking, because by this point I had sort of given up on finding these things when I Googled them. But I figured at least one other person would have made note of the giant red man who did battle with the horses in the sky. But no.
But apparently not. Apparently
Yeah.
there was other fish to fry in Strasbourg at the time.
Yeah. But yeah, so this one, it's really cool. It is exactly what it sounds like. It's just a big red boy. He's got some buildings behind him, and there's some dark horses riding up to him.
Well, and the color of like the like matte, like dull navy of the night sky, the dull kind of yellow stars all around, and then the bright red man and the shining red fortress beset by like dark blue shadowy figures on horseback. It's very cool. It's so
super
cool.
sick.
Was this your favorite one?
This is pretty close. It was my favorite one, and then I did a little more research, and we're getting up to my favorite one.
Okay.
Actually, you know what? We'll save our favorites. Well, we'll discuss what our favorites were at the very end, as I think we'll do.
Okay. That's what we'll do then.
That way we don't color anyone's perception.
Yes, absolutely. We wouldn't want to do that because we're
very
after all,
objective.
Scholars. Yeah, right.
We're very careful journalists here.
It's to even call us journalists, Matt. Okay, cool. Yeah, I like this one a lot. This is, it's not my favorite, but it's close. So,
Yeah.
Now we will move on to Folio 131, which is a very interesting one. So this is kind of a nice warm color palette, like orange. Another one of these like cool spired cities on kind of an orange plain, and above it are three bright suns in the sky, kind of in a parting in the clouds. And the caption reads, quote, "In 1533, three suns shone similarly as if they had fiery clouds around them, and they stood over the city of Munster, as if the city and the houses were burning, as painted here," end quote. Very cool. This is a beautiful like composition, like color choice and everything. It's just wonderful. And also kind of like an interesting astronomical phenomena. I probably should have looked up like multiple suns astronomical phenomenon, but I
don't worry. I also have an instance of multiple suns, so we'll get to that one when we hit it.
And we'll say we planned that, and it wasn't shoddy journalism.
Yeah, cut that out. Strike that from the record.
Strike that. The main reason I picked this out was not because I thought the idea of three suns was particularly interesting, but because 1533 in Munster is a year before a pretty well documented historical account called the Munster Rebellion. Had you heard of this before?
Vaguely, like in passing. We got made fun of on our Gilles de Rais episode for like not knowing enough about the 100 Years' War. So I'm not going to admit how little I knew about it. But
I knew about this one pretty in depth, and I'm just going to be kind of going off the top of my brain here. I'm just going to give kind of a brief
for sure
book. But it was essentially after the German Peasants' War. There was a forceful attempt to establish a theocracy in Munster. And it was this guy, Jan Mathis, who essentially, supposedly, was in communion with God, and he led an Anabaptist revolt. And the Anabaptists were a kind of German type of Protestantism who were sort of against obviously the Holy Roman Empire. So they kicked out their bishop, and they like kind of started their own little theocratic government. And yeah, so because of this, there was like a siege, and like Mathis wrote out just alone to the battlefield in like shining armor and
That's pretty
immediately
cool.
got decapitated, put his head on a pole, and they like nailed his genitals to the city gate.
Okay, that's a little less cool.
And then his friend John something was like recognized as his religious and political successor. So as they're being besieged, he's like, "Yeah, I'm the successor to David," and he starts like donning royal garb and stuff. And he's like, "Make polygamy compulsory because there's like more women than there were men." So he has like, I think it was like 13, 15
Good
wives or
grief.
something. And supposedly he killed a woman for refusing to marry him. But because of this, a siege wore on, people started to starve, and it got pretty grisly. And then, of course, obviously, it was quelled by the Catholic armies that were besetting them, and all the people were stuck up in carry-on cages.
Yeah, I'm looking at a picture of these cages right now. That's crazy that they're just still hanging up.
Yeah, they're still there, and it's the same ones that those bodies were in. But anyway, yeah, so this is that's what I know offhand. I'm sure I could probably look into it a little more. I mean, honestly, we could probably do a whole episode on that. But I
Yeah.
just found that interesting because that happened in 1534. So I was
Mhm.
trying to find some connection between these two events because obviously this was recorded after that. But I couldn't find anything. So
Interesting.
it's just sort of an interesting, that those two kind of very fascinating historical, like one historical account and one like supposed
Yeah.
folklore account kind of coincide there, which is cool.
Also, just with my knowledge of the Munster Rebellion, which is now everything I have just been told, I'm just going to issue a word of advice for all our little people out there making their autonomous zones and things like that. If the leader of your movement has his head cut off and his genitals are nailed to your city door, maybe don't loudly declare that you're his successor.
Give up.
I would probably just quietly surrender and say it was all his idea. But, to each their own.
And also, if you're ever in any point of power, stop making polygamy legal. Like, just
don't do it.
Just chill, dude. It's fine. What is it? Why is that always the case? It's so weird.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's how it always goes with cults, but whatevs. Okay, what's next? 150.
Folio 150, yeah. So this is another one of the ones that I picked out. I called it The Warrior in the Eastern Sky. A lot of these I just made like little taglines for them, but I do have a full quote on this one. Okay. In the year 1545, on the 29th date of March, on Palm Sunday, a terrible, ghastly vision was seen in the Kingdom of Poland. At 8 o'clock in the morning, a great peal of thunder struck. After this, 3 red crosses were seen in the east, in the middle of which was a man in armor with a fiery sword. A great band of warriors came towards him on horseback and on foot, and fought with him until 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And then the quote ends there, so presumably they all went home after that.
Yeah, they just gave up. This is a really striking one. This is cool.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, so we have exactly like it says. There's a little corner of sky, so you can see that it's occurring during the day, and just a circle of clouds sort of framing our aforementioned warrior in white and the 3 crosses. And on one side, there's what appears to be a dragon coming towards him.
Yeah.
And on the other side,
quoted, but he just felt the need like to throw in a dragon.
Yeah, he's like just to shake things up.
Yeah.
Up the odds a little bit. And then on the other side is the aforementioned host of riders coming towards them. And it's only now that I realize I put 2 things where it's a warrior appearing in the sky and doing battle right after each other. Didn't catch that earlier, but I think they're both cool.
So. This is very interesting. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, just like 131, the one that we just discussed, the colors are a lot warmer than they are in a lot of the other ones, which is part of what drew my eye to it so immediately. And this one's very cool. I like this one a lot.
Me too. It kind of, to foreshadow what we'll talk about a little later, it does seem kind of very like Visions of Revelation-esque, if that makes any sense. Like it kind of reminds me of the concept of Jesus with his kind of woolen white hair on like white horse battling, like riding out from the heavens. Obviously it's not what this is, but it's kind of in that sort of, I don't know, aesthetic, I guess you could say.
Yeah, a holy warrior from the heavens coming down and cleansing the wicked.
Yeah, I guess. Well, we don't
force.
know who the good guys are. We just know that around lunchtime, they get a little crabby and they all go home. So
Yeah, they called it there, and he's like, all right, well, we'll do this again in a couple hundred years. See you guys.
yeah, yeah. This is a cool one. There's no way I can even describe like what could cause someone to like think they saw this aside from just like getting real like blitzed out on mushrooms or something. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. Like, so this is the sort of thing where it's, yeah, like your three cases are really, like you said, like they ate something a little funny,
right.
a like mistranslation maybe, or like he just was just going off a story that he heard, or and then the one I believe, there's just giant people. They do battle in the sky sometimes, so keep your eyes out.
I mean, Roald Dahl said there was giant people in the sky, cloud giants, you know. And what are you gonna argue with Roald Dahl?
Yeah, when has he ever been connected to intelligence operations? Not
Oh
once.
no, was he?
Oh yeah, dude.
Dang
Sorry,
it!
we'll do a Roald Dahl episode later on, I
You
guess.
just ruined my day. Not actually. I
Yeah,
just
we'll
didn't
do
know that.
instead of a movie episode, we'll just read Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
No, that'd be nice, actually. Well, I'm allowed to love his books, and I'm
Yeah,
going
no,
to.
look, I listen to Grimes, so like I can't judge you for
Yeah,
any of your problematic
you
faves.
absolutely cannot judge me. Awesome. Let's move. We're running out of time here, so let's move on
Yes.
to Folio 155. I'm just gonna breeze over this one because I didn't have anything interesting to say about it. But the quote was, "In 1534, one of the wondrous creatures which lived in the open sea was caught and taken to Venice, and it looks as it's painted here." Which is just kind of struck me as a funny little caption. But this is a like furry dragon with like a hydra sprout of like dog-like, lizard-like heads at the front, and then like a long tail, and it's completely blue. And it's just really cool looking. And
Yeah,
that's all I have to say
and
about that.
yeah, as far as our rational explanations go, the classic one for sea monsters like this, maybe it was a giant squid, right? Because if you hear something written where it's like, yeah, it had all these like weird tendrils that ended in big head-like
right.
things. If you look at a squid, yeah, I would also think that was a hydra if I saw it in the ocean. I would
Absolutely.
run away.
Yeah, and I would also take it to Venice personally.
Yeah, absolutely. First stop. Okay, so then the next one that I have is Folio 156, the very next one. Explosion in, I think it's Mechel or Meshel. I'm not sure how you pronounce the CH. But here we go. I have a translation here. In 1546, goodness gracious, in 1546, in the month of August, the fire from the sky struck a tower in which there were more than 400 tons of powder in Mechel in Nederland, and exactly half of the city burned down, which is also a special sign from God.
Some editorializing there, Hans. But...
Yeah. And yeah, so I like this one too. There's there's a big explosion. You see the city burning. There's a couple people flying away up in one of the corners, which I was a big fan of. That's the real reason I included this one, if I'm being honest. And yeah, on this one, I've got to say, I personally would also take 400 tons of gunpowder being struck by lightning as a sign from God. Like, you've done something wrong if this occurs.
Yes. Yeah, boy. I just cannot get over the little guys flying away from the explosion. It's really fun.
Yeah, they're the best part of it. It's super cool. It looks apocalyptic, but then you see the two guys, and it immediately becomes goofy. Like,
it's so awesome. Yeah, honestly, it looks straight out of a comic book. It's really cool.
Yeah.
Sweet. We can move on to Folio 165.
Yes. Okay. So Folio 165 is the aforementioned. It's the instance of multiple suns that I found.
Yeah.
Just 5 suns over Leipzig is what it's called, and yeah, it's exactly that. There's just 5 little suns. They're hanging out. I couldn't find a translation for this one, but it's pretty self-explanatory. There's a creepy little halo around them, and the name of this phenomena is sun dogs, is what they call it, and it's where ice crystals in the atmosphere cause halos to form, and sometimes even like it looks like there's multiple suns. So that's what most people assume these things are. There's a pretty famous painting of them from, I think, Stockholm in the 1500s as well. And it looks really cool, very different style. But many people call that like the Sundogs painting. Maybe I'll send that to you right now then. Yeah. So we might throw that one up too, so people can see that.
Oh, I looked up the Sundogs painting and it auto corrected it to the dogs painting and it just showed me the dogs playing poker. Which is a little bit shocking.
We'll throw that one up too. Little palate cleanser.
Yeah, right. Just a little fun thing. Yeah, this is a very fascinating, like, and I'm looking at a picture of Sundogs, like, it's cool. Like, you can sort of see how it almost looks like a reflection of, like, a sun on either side. So it does look a lot like what we're seeing here in this folio. I like this a lot. I like the guy's little, like, Paul Simon pursing lips face.
Yeah.
You know, you just kind of
Yeah, because to be clear, the all 5 of the little suns have little faces, and they're just sort of like looking around. And I'm a big fan of that as well.
Oh, are you looking at 169 instead of 165? Because those are two separate ones with a similar phenomena. And Folio 165 just has one sundog.
Oh, yeah, hang on now. I'm talking about, there's 5 of them in mine. Let's see, 169.
Yeah, that's Folio 169.
Yep, yeah, I wrote that down wrong, because this is the one I'm looking at. This is my guy.
Extra sun content. I'll say that, like, there's like 4 or 5 different of these, like, sun appearances in this whole book anyway, so.
Which, admittedly, I would also take all of those as, like, signs from God, right? Like, if the sun does something weird, I'd get a little nervous.
Yep, that's God. There he is. Yeah. And just because we know how it happens doesn't mean it's not God, Matt.
That is very true.
I need you to open your heart to the Christ right now on mic.
It might be closer to that than you think.
Oh no, am I winning our little bet? Well,
you may be.
Sweet, that's awesome. So now we can move on, I think, to the Revelation portion, if you'd like.
Yeah.
The Apocalypse.
The grand finale.
The big finale. So we're the last few we'll be discussing are from the revelation that appeared to the Apostle John, who I'm calling the Apostle John, not the Saint John. Not because I'm bashing the Catholics, but just because Saint is an extra biblical word, and we're trying to make this agnostic of denomination. But before we jump into these paintings, I just want to say, I feel like Revelation gets a bad rap from people. You know, it is called the Apocalypse, right? And people think apocalypse, they think end of the world. But apocalypse is just a Greek word that means, do you know what it means, Matt?
I used to, dude. I remember I looked this one up. Hit me with the definition.
A revelation.
Oh.
Yeah. So it doesn't mean like the end of the world. And like from an eschatological standpoint, like the end of the world being what this book's about isn't quite right, at least like in a strictly biblical sense. Like there is a world ending, but it's not quite like
it's not the Earth is being destroyed.
Absolutely not. Yeah, it's actually quite a happy book by the end. There's just some kind of startling visions.
It goes a little crazy before we get to the happy ending. Is the problem?
Night is always darkest before the dawn. But anyway, this portion starts out with an image from the very beginning of Revelation, chapter 1, verse 12 and 17, which is this is Folio 172. And it's a depiction of the 7 lampstands and Jesus standing and kind of John on his feet before him. And these, so in the photo, we see another similar ring of cloud in the sky, and then like Jesus with, I guess, a cloud for a helmet for some reason.
Yeah, there's a big cloud behind his head instead of the usual halo,
which neither of which would be right, because the actual description is that he just had hair as white as wool. But in this, it looks like they just stuck a big thing of wool on his head. He's got hair, which is pretty funny.
Close enough.
Close enough. And he's got like a little maroon robe, and there's a sword coming out of his mouth, which is accurate to the vision. And then 7 golden lampstands. And just kind of a quick overview of what this depicted. And this is no reading on my part. This is literally what it says in the text. But the golden lampstands represented the 7 congregations at that time in Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamum, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea.
Hang on now.
However,
one of these things is not like the other. I did not remember that Philadelphia was one of the congregations.
Yeah, Philadelphia was a Greek city and not just like a real rough city in America. But something that's not shown in this picture is the 7 stars, which were supposedly supposed to appear in Jesus' hand, which represents the angels that watched over each of these congregations. But either way, this is still a pretty sick painting. I like it. Yeah. It's cool. What's next? Folio 185. We're going to have 2 beast folios to close this out. So Folio 185 represents Revelation 11, 5 through 8. And what this scriptural account is speaking of is two figurative witnesses or prophets of God and of Jesus. And so I'm going to do a quick quote from the Bible here to just, well, actually, first, I guess I'll just describe the picture and then we'll go into like the account it relates to. So the picture we see, there's a backdrop of a city that's sort of like towers are toppling in that same Gothic architecture that we mentioned we liked. To the left of the picture, there's this blue horned beast feeding upon two bodies in a very bloody fashion.
Mm-hmm.
Towards the middle, we see those same two bodies now lying on the ground, dead, and several kind of medieval people pointing at them and like looking at them. And then in the top center, we see the two bodies being borne on a cloud into heaven, and a similar crowd is pointing up at them going, whoa.
Yeah, yo, look at this.
Yeah, look at this. So the account that this comes from, I'm going to read different snippets of it and then kind of break it down. So the first part is from Revelation 11:7. This is from the American Standard Version of the Bible. It says, quote, "And when they shall have finished their testimony, the beast that cometh up out of the abyss shall make war with them and overcome them and kill them," end quote. And so that's what we see in the first little snippet of this I guess like series of events, is the beast coming up and killing them. And then the account continues in verse 8, speaking of these two murdered witnesses or prophets. It says, quote, "And their corpses will be on the main street of the great city that is in a spiritual sense called Sodom and Egypt, where their Lord was also executed on the stake," end quote. That's from the New World Translation. So to sort of break this down, what is this beast? What does this represent prophetically? So the word beast that's used in the original Greek language here is therion, which literally means wild beast. And here's a quote from Vine's expository dictionary on what that relates to this scripture. It says, quote, "Therion in a sense of a wild beast is used in the Apocalypse, Revelation, for the two anti-Christian potentates who are destined to control the affairs of the nations with the satanic power in the closing period of the present era," end quote. So the two kings or potentates that he's referring to are the kings of North and South, which is referenced in Isaiah. This is a bit heavy on the scripture, but
No, I'm here for it.
essentially this beast represents some sort of political powers. And to furthermore, it's coming up out of the abyss. Well, what does that mean? Well, abyss comes from the original Greek word abyssos, which means very or exceedingly deep. And in the Bible, it's often translated into English as abyss, like a deep chasm,
Mm-hmm.
because it's used like in reference to the sea, or makes like comparison to the sea seemingly endless depth, as it would have seemed to an ancient person.
Mm-hmm.
So because of this, we can also identify this wild beast, this therion, that comes up out of the sea with another wild beast that comes up out of the sea in Revelation 13:1, which is what our next folio depicts.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll come back to that. But something that's interesting is like the sea is used, especially like in Revelation, as a metaphor for like a sea of people, like so essentially the inhabitants of the earth. And this wild beast, this living political system given power by the people and is of satanic design, that's where this satanic system leaps out from, and it kills two righteous people. And so I think now that I've explained that, you can kind of see what that's getting at, which is that wild evil political structures destroying righteous people, which
Yeah, I was gonna say, fortunately, I can't think of one satanic political structure out there right now. So
either can I. And then the last thing to comment on, you might have noticed something weird in the 8th verse of Revelation, which was in reference to the city in the background of this photo, which was that he said the city was called Sodom, but also Egypt, which was where their Lord Jesus was executed on the stake. And that might make you scratch your head, because you think, okay, well, we know Jesus died in Jerusalem, and Sodom was a different city than Egypt and Jerusalem. Those are 3 different cities. How are they all the same? Well, what John is referring to here is the figurative Jerusalem, which is kind of used to illustrate essentially a figurative city that claims to worship God, but kind of like its Old Testament equivalent is filled with moral decay, false worship, betrayer of God, Yahweh or Jehovah, and kind of being ruled by satanic governments. And, that kind of ties in with the themes of Sodom and Egypt,
Mm-hmm.
a giant world superpower known for occultism and magic, and a city for violent rape. So,
Yeah. And both of which famously have not gotten along great with God's chosen people in the past as well. Like,
but this could be applied to modern Christian institutions that pretend to hold up that righteous front like ancient Jerusalem in the Old Testament Bible did, but are not living up to the standards of God. And furthermore, you could identify it with Babylon the Great, who appears later in the Apocalypse, sort of as this like world empire of false religion. So that is essentially the theological read on this picture. I hope I didn't bore you.
No, look, if anybody's listening after the Knowing episode, then they're here for the Bible study just as much as I am. I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, and well, I mean, even like if you're not like interested in Christian stuff, I think just cool beasts and like weird visions are fascinating. So that's what that means, and then we'll move right along to the last one, which is Folio 187. Why don't you tell us about that, Matt?
So Folio 187. This is, as you alluded to earlier, Revelation 13, 1 through 4 specifically is what's quoted. Although I couldn't find the specific translation, so I just wrote out. I just copied King James Version because, as I've stated before, I have a sentimental attachment to it. All right, here we go. Quote, "And I stood upon the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were like the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power, and his seat, and great authority. And I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed. And all of the world wondered after the beast, and they worshipped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him?" And in the drawing, we have exactly that pretty much.
Yeah, it's a pretty accurate description of that beast. You kind of even get the leopard spotting on it.
Yeah, there's a little weird fuzzy beast, and there's the dragon with the various crowns and horns.
Yeah. Do you know what that little weird fuzzy beast is, by the way?
Is it the Antichrist? Am I correct in this? Or am I...
No, not quite. But that is the... Sorry, not to like just be like, no.
No, this is just me like remembering how little I remember of Revelations, because I just got scared when I was younger.
It is spooky. I'm totally blanking on the meaning of it, but it was that sort of like goat-shaped beast with like a double horns.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And he's just kind of chilling. He's like a fluffy white little, kind of looks like a little dog with horns.
He really does look a little cute in this one.
It's a little unfortunate.
In spite of possible demonic intervention, we're back, everybody.
They don't want the truth to get out.
Yeah, they didn't want the truth to get out. But yeah, so like we were saying, it's very true to the scriptures, including the whole world worshiping it. Notably, some of the people in the whole world who are included here are dressed in Catholic attire, which is, as we've seen several times throughout this, Protestant-friendly themes have shown up, particularly considering that it's, Germany in the 1500s. Like, this was a fairly Protestant nation, so that's probably why there's so much, like, specifically Catholic-directed energies.
Yeah, absolutely. Something I found interesting about this picture, though, is the weird, like, tongues of fire flying out from the heavens at the Catholics, which I'm assuming is, like, divine judgment from God, but like that's not in the account.
Yeah, it's not mentioned. I was wondering about that as well. It's very funny because so we have the little beast crawling out. We have our little fuzzy beast sitting next to it, hanging out and smiling at it. Then there's the group of people worshiping it, and then like in the background there's like a group of missiles like flying towards them.
Yeah, it's strange.
And
it's cool, but
yeah, like with all the things where it's like added without being mentioned. It's pretty sick. It looks cool.
yeah,
But we're not sure where it came from.
yeah, it's I guess just artistic license there. But another thing that's interesting is the fiery red dragon is missing, which I thought was interesting. And I wasn't sure if that's just because there was maybe some reticence to depict Satan.
Yeah, that was my assumption.
Yeah, could be
because yeah, the little devils show up in medieval paintings all the time, but it's very rare that you see like the man himself hanging out.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true.
So I don't know. That was my guess as well as to why he wasn't there.
I don't know. But anyway, anything else you want to say about this folio?
Yeah, I do like the just the very, very clear color contrast as well.
Oh,
like
yes,
the
absolutely.
just darkness in the ocean from which it's emerging, and then the much lighter sky.
It's scary.
So it's pretty cool. This is another one where the colors really pop. These, like, that's, I think, if we can, do you want to just transition into final thoughts? Because I've just sort of got everything else I say will be just sort of final thoughts in general. Yeah, the colors really pop. It, like I said, all of these are just so beautiful. I really do recommend just sort of like taking an afternoon to just scroll through, take a look at them.
Absolutely. It's very cool.
And then, before we go, do you want to talk about your favorite one? We'll reveal it to the audience. Now that they've seen them
why
all.
don't you go ahead first? Well, actually, let's try to guess each other's favorites.
Okay. Yeah, for sure.
All right. Let me go back and pull up. I think my thought as to your favorite was Folio 150 with the knight in the sky fighting the hosts. Is that correct?
Guilty. Yeah.
It's so cool.
It's so cool. It feels like the medieval version of like Doom Eternal when you're looking at it. Like it's just it's so cool.
Yeah, no, it's awesome.
So yeah, that one's my favorite. Guilty as charged.
I will say after seeing that one, it's making a run for my favorite, but I'll still let you guess what my answer was before that.
I might actually, I think I'm going to go, maybe I'm projecting a little bit because this was also one of my favorites, but I might just go for Folio number 1, classic Noah's Flood. Was I close?
Interesting. Not at all. You're about 130 off. I mean, that's a cool one. It's very cool. I liked Folio 131, which is the Three Sons over Munster. It's not like...
That was my other guess.
As like shocking or evocative imagery as some of the other ones we talked about, but the color is just so nice. Like, I could just like see that as a desktop background.
Yeah, I look at it and I hear like the John Williams score for like Star Wars playing in my head.
Yeah, exactly. Like when Luke is standing in front of the two in Red Suns and it's playing the Jedi theme.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, exactly. I can just. Yeah, I can imagine Luke standing at like the end of that the little tower, like off to the left. I can just see him standing there, the wind blowing his hair.
Gosh dang it. Disconnected,
reconnected immediately.
Well, I guess that's our sign to maybe cut this one short.
Yeah. So we'll call it here.
If you liked the podcast, leave a comment on YouTube, subscribe on YouTube, write us a message and a review on iTunes and Spotify if you can. Rate us 5 stars. It will help. We like that. Or just come over to our Instagram, leave a comment. Matt puts cool memes up when we post, and it's fun. We have a good time. So yeah, thank you for listening. We love you. I love you. I don't know what I'm talking about. But until next time, dear listeners,
it's all connected.
My father and Glendower have been broken away. The powers of earth may serve so great a day. Come, let's take a muster speedily. Doomsday is near. Die all! Die merrily! Yeah!